QIMR Berghofer acknowledges the traditional and cultural custodians of the lands, waters and seas across Queensland, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We support the cultural knowledge, determination and commitment of First Nations communities in caring for health and well-being for millennia.
Welcome to QIMR Berghofer's 80th anniversary podcast. I'm Claire Blake, and we're celebrating 8 decades of bold ideas, real science, and the brilliant men and women who made it happen. We did start in a leaky old army hut, and now we're tackling cancer, decoding the brain, tracking infectious diseases, and rewriting what's possible in medicine. We'll dive into the true stories, funny, messy, inspiring, from the people who made it all happen, and those carrying the torch into the future, because science isn't just labs and data, it's human. And it's happening right here. I'm so pleased to have in the suite with us today Professor Colin Mackerras, the nephew of our industry rock stars Josephine Bancroft, nee Bancroft and Ian Mackerras, who were at the very beginning of QIMR, when it was just a US surplus army hut. There's an incredible legacy in both your families, but just the Bancroft part of your tree. So Joseph came out here in the late 1860s. As soon as he got here, he was looking at trying to grow rust-free wheat. He was looking at all sorts of parasites and all the problems that Queenslanders had. Really the first one to really pitch in and help.
Exactly.
So he was very gregarious. He was a surgeon. He had a son, Thomas.
Yeah.
So Thomas was also born overseas, and he was also a physician and a surgeon and a researcher who did incredible things with mosquito viruses, polio. But he was very much a researcher, wasn't he?
Yeah. So Josephine, who was the daughter of Thomas, so she had already a background in entomological research and parasitological research, and that was very important, I think. She grew up to be a really wonderful researcher, and she had a very wonderful personality when it comes to doing research. She married my uncle Ian Mackerras, my father's elder brother, and he was born in New Zealand. My father, I think, was born in Sydney. In Sydney, they both went to the university, both Uncle Ian and Aunt Josephine, who had been Bancroft, and they married. They were a very, very good research couple, and I want to emphasize that because in those days, women didn't get credit for research, and it tended to be the men who got the credit for research. They were an ideal research couple, and they were devoted to each other their whole life. They adored each other their whole life. They had one son, that's my cousin David. I come from a bigger family, Alan, but my father, I'm not ashamed of him, of course. He didn't have the achievements of Uncle Ian. Uncle Ian became a really, really wonderful entomologist. He made a lot of contributions, and he wrote a lot of papers, and he edited a book on bad insects of Australia. And I think that the relationship between my Aunt Josephine and Uncle Ian was really quite unique because they both did research at a time when women didn't get credit for it. Indeed, I go stronger. If you look at the history of husband and wife researchers in science in Australia, I think there are not many that can compete with them. They did remarkable achievements, and they had a remarkable life. Yeah. Wasn't one that was subordinate. I think they both influenced each other, and they did just joint research.
I heard they were never happier than working alongside each other.
Well, that's what I've heard too.
They loved sailing and fishing together.
Yeah, no, that's another thing I want to mention. My father shared that. They sailed a lot, and my father had a yacht, and I think Uncle Ian and Aunt Jo also did. They loved sailing together, fishing and sailing together and yachting.
I think they blurred the lines too, because they loved fishing, but they would not feast on the fish
until they'd tested out the blood. Yeah?
They'd done a complete analysis on the fish.
That's right.
People might not know that Ian served in both world wars. At 18, he was a lab attendant, and he got gassed in France.
Yeah. They were both officers.
She was a major.
So she was a major, and he became, I think, a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Their contribution to the war was to do research and stop people dying from these frightful parasites and, mosquitoes and malaria and those sorts of diseases. And also cockroaches. And she did extensive research, not only about mosquitoes, but also about cockroaches.
Yeah. Well, they're credited largely for stopping the losses of deaths of malaria
Exactly.
in World War II. The cockroaches, I think, started when there was a terrible salmonella bug around southeast Queensland where toddlers and babies were dying.
Absolutely.
And Josephine and her team were the ones that discovered that it was a cockroach.
Exactly. And they deserve a lot of credit for that, I think.
And till the end of her life, I think she published many, many more papers on cockroaches and looking at different species.
That was a great achievement. Wars are horrible. I mean, I'm not saying that all the war fighting in all the wars is a bad thing. But if you're going to fight in a war, I would rather do something that saved lives, like, medical research, rather than kill people.
And then they came back and almost immediately started their work at QIMR.
Yeah. Well, he became Uncle Ian Mackerras. He became the director of QIMR in 1947. Let me tell you one of my first memories. My father, he had a study and he had there a picture of Uncle Ian doing research and looking at a microscope, doing research on a funnel web spider, which I thought was scary at the time. I still think so. I thought it was a bit scary and I admired the way that he could do that, Like, although I'm not an expert in this area, but I do know that a funnel web is something that you have to be scared of because they go very quickly and they're very, very poisonous and they're deadly. So, I mean, I thought it was great that Uncle Ian could do it. I wouldn't be able to do it.
You just have to look at his war record to show that that was a man of incredible courage.
I thought it was wonderful. Anyway, I have to say that they lived in Brisbane and I didn't see them very, very much. When I was about 12 years old, 1950 or so, my elder brother Neil drove my twin brother Malcolm and me all the way from Sydney. We just drove. In those days, of course, the roads weren't nearly as good as they are now. We came to Brisbane. Of course, we visited Uncle Ian and Aunt Jo, and they were very, very, very nice to us. And we had a lovely time with them. I just remember it with such pleasure. He's so personal and effusive. She's a bit quieter, but she's also very, very people-centered and very, very kind and very, When my father died, he came to Sydney and several times to see him and join with him. He was very, very good personality, very nice personality.
You were able to see your Aunt Jo not long before she died, which was nice.
It was in 1971. She died in October, passed away in October of that year. Shortly before she died, I called on them with my wife, Alice, late wife, Alice. We had a very nice time with them, but I remember her complaining that she had a roaring in the ears. Must have been like severe tinnitus. But anyway, she died soon after that. And my daughter, my youngest daughter, Josephine, was born a few months after that. So I called to Josephine after. My wife Alice and we called to Josephine after Aunt Josephine. So the name continues. So she's still a Josephine Mackerras.
You yourself and Emeritus Professor, colleagues and alumni say that you're very famous at Griffith Uni.
Well, I don't know what about famous, but I've worked at Griffith for a long, long time.
And you're a sinologist.
There's a sinologist. There's a picture of me there outside a room with my name on it. Painting was by Richard Blundell, who was a friend of mine. And he put it into the Archibald Prize, but it didn't win or anything. We gave it to Griffith University, and it's hanging there now. It's on the wall there now, so that's nice. I'm a sinologist, and I first went to China in 1964, before the Cultural Revolution. It was very, very coincidental. I went to England to do a degree at Cambridge University, and I wrote a thesis about the Tang Dynasty. And while I was there, I met a friend, a coincidence, in the Market Square, and he told me he was going to China. Endymion Wilkinson, he later became the EU ambassador in China. I said to him, look, if the Social Affairs Office in London ask if you know of anybody else who would like to go to China, could you give them my name, please? They did ask him, and he did give them my name, and they wrote to me.
And you ended up there for 2 years, that stint?
Yeah, 2 years. And Alice, my wife, late wife, she also came. And our first son was actually born there, Stephen.
You have something else here with you, a letter.
Yes, I'd like it because it's about my Uncle Ian. This is a letter that my sister found that he wrote shortly after Aunt Josephine died, dated the 6th of November 1971, was to my brother Alistair, who'd come to the service, and he was very grateful. Uncle Ian was grateful to him for having taken the trouble to come. This is a belated small note of thanks. Belated only because I've not been in very good condition for writing. Even though Jo had so abundantly earned her peaceful departure, it has been awfully difficult to learn to be rational about it. And later he talks about abysmal sadness of her passing, his gratitude to Alistair for coming to the service and having lunch and so on.
An inspiring relationship from every angle, really.
So I really admired and loved Uncle Ian. And I know my father did.
You're a twin.
Yeah.
And you've been part of one of the longest running research.
Well, that's right, I did. I came and did several interviews.
With our Professor Nick Martin.
I know. And also my twin brother Malcolm, he did it in Canberra. It was really interesting. And of course, the whole nature of twins, we're only fraternal twins. We're not identical. But still, there's something about the genes which is very close.
Nick often mentions how important fraternal twins are to research.
Well, I'm glad to have taken part in that yourself.
There's still a Mackerras involved in our research, and it's just been such a thrill to see you here today. Thanks for coming.
I'm really proud to be part of the 80th anniversary because I think the QIMR Berghofer has made such a wonderful contribution to medical research and entomological and so on. And I think that's wonderful, something to be very proud of.
There's a much bigger story that we haven't been able to get into today, but if you'd like to find out more about the beginnings of QIMR and the Bancroft family, QIMRB.edu.au.